Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm hoping that the most difficult part has now just passed, which is finding an expression for the face when you're hearing someone say very flattering things about you, and you want to rise to the occasion of the seriousness with which they are taking the moment, but also not make yourself or other people think that you think you're that big of a deal. And I'm still working on that expression. All right. So first, I want to thank Arlo, of course, for inviting me back. As he pointed out, it was my third visit here. By the way, my first visit here, I remember that Joyce Carol Oates was one of the featured authors, and she was in the middle of this theater, I believe, for every single author session the entire weekend. I just remembered that tonight. And everyone else, and especially Ben Pegg, who did all the tech work to help me make this event. It's such an honor to speak in a series named for John Hersey. By the way, is the sound okay? Is it like too close? It feels a little close. Okay. It's an honor to speak in a series named for John Hersey, to whom I feel a mediated but permanent bond, given how important his essay on Hiroshima was for so many writers and thinkers of the 20th century. And quite specifically, John Hersey was important to George Bataille, whose own essay on Hersey and on Hiroshima heavily influenced Marguerite Duras, who then wrote a script, the movie Hiroshima Mon Amour. What did John Hersey manage that was so impressive to Duras and Bataille and so many others? He rendered the vanishing flash of nuclear annihilation by dilating the horror of 6 survivors. I believe it is no coincidence that thereafter, Hersey seems to have turned mostly to fiction, which offers different resources from reportage for dealing with hell. It's supposed to be, oh, this is the water. It's in a reusable bottle. Okay. It's great luck that the theme this year is attention, because it is my own main theme, and perhaps my single trick when it comes to talking about how I write novels and why, and what we can all do as writers to be good in multiple senses of that word. And I will say, in talking about novels, I'm also going to talk about my own novels. The title of this talk is How to Look, and I don't mean like how you look and what to steal. 8 years ago, I walked the perimeter of the Rome airport. That's actually me from behind. It isn't. It was afternoon when I left my airport hotel. My aim was ostensibly to find a restaurant at the mouth of the Fiumicino Canal, where the waters of the Tiber are disgorged into the Tyrrhenian Sea. In truth, my aim was not so much to get dinner as to yield. I observed huge sections of concrete pipes that were the height of 2-story buildings. Beyond razor wire, I passed row after row of fuel tanks, ladders winding up their sides. Next was a phalanx of rusted old boats in dry dock, covered by flapping tarps. A wind was coming up, promising rain. I skirted an abandoned development of some kind, half-built, its windows smashed, wild dogs on its concrete foundation, barking at me not to come any closer. When the rain came down, I was on a dark stretch of road next to a park or no man's land. Cars hurtled past, splashing me. A few honked, having interpolated me optimistically as open for business. In Italy, prostitution seems to have a far more advanced median age. When I finally arrived at the harbor of Fiumicino, rainwater moved over its jetty in thick undulations. I thought about the Roman slaves who pulled ships laden with marble up the canal. I thought about the fuel tanks and the wild dogs. I never used any of these details. I was engaged in forcing myself to pay attention. The object of attention is less important in this sort of exercise. The key is that it be something that isn't intended to be looked at in a sustained way. To endure or tolerate or last are all terms that indicate a person withstands some kind of burden to which they've been subjected. It could even be said of me that I like to be subjected to things. I once walked under virulent summer sun with no shade or relief for 6 hours across a peninsula in the Dominican Republic while traveling alone. I passed on foot through clusters of modest little houses with tin roofs. I saw people, a woman in hair curlers cooking on charcoal briquettes, and people saw me, the men in faded military uniform who stopped to offer me a ride in their Jeep. I refused their offer and was abandoned back into my solitary 14-mile pursuit. Like walking, I find films valuable as practices of attention. The original anthology film Archives on Lafayette Street in Manhattan was designed with high black partitions between each seat so that the viewers could wall themselves into the screen like anchorites. This was before my era. I do my best without the partitions, with merely a dark theater and a locked-in commitment. So some might know this is a still from the movie Satan Tango by Bela Tarr, who I will discuss in a moment after we watch a short segment of it. That was a mere 3 minutes. It may have felt long to you, but that scene goes on for 12 minutes. So Bellatar, it's devastating to have to say is one of the greatest filmmakers of my lifetime, Hungarian, and he died on Tuesday, for those who don't know. He had just been recently in Los Angeles introducing a screening of that film. So this scene of people dancing in a drunken stupor, a man balancing bread on his face, an accordion squeezing a repeating melody, although maybe some noticed, I don't think the accordion player in the scene is actually producing the music that we're hearing. He's just sort of doing this. This scene seems to constitute a godless or bad infinity, a vacuum in which Pete and Repeat are sitting on a fence, and Pete falls off. Who is left? It is no accident that Estika, the young girl who watches from outside the bar, decides to kill herself and thereby put a stop to things. Satan Tango is 7 hours and 19 minutes long. Events occur, Estika wrestles with and poisons a cat in a punishing sequence of love and abuse. Horses skitter across an abandoned town square. People are manipulated by a Svengali who appeals to their craven need for approval. An alcoholic doctor transfers brandy from a jug to a decanter to a glass. Susan Sontag said she would happily see Satan Tango every year for the rest of her life. It's a kind of silly flex to say that. It's 7 hours, that ain't shit to me. But let's do it in the Sontag voice. 7 hours is the absolute minimum one should be prepared to commit to for a full cinematic experience. But I am guilty myself of striving for such endurance and have seen Satan Tango twice in the past 3 years. The 19th century American theologian and minister Robert Baird espoused the power of fixed and continuous attention to impress upon distractible minds a sustaining belief in God, to hold them to the subject, and not just for a few hours on Sundays. For Baird, what needed to be combated was distraction. The solution was the revival meeting, which might last days or weeks, a Bellatar film like no other, in which attendees would not be outwardly coerced, but would self-coerce under the influence of collective prayer. Baird wanted to improve people's mental constitution through the form of the revival. In walking to Fiumicino or watching Hungarian actors trudge across a wind-pummeled landscape, I am working on my own mental constitution, employed in an iterative practice of discipline. My son, a college freshman, says you can tell who the serious students are in a lecture hall by the fact that they sit in the front and do not take any notes. This was a revelation to me. The serious student, he says, simply sits there and listens, pays attention. As he said this, I pictured myself lifelong, foolishly and furiously writing down what a lecturer is saying, everything I can manage to scribble. That's for dilettantes, apparently. And only having figured out this now, I will henceforth be in the front listening with my notebook put away. In his film Melting, Tom Anderson captured a strawberry sundae that drips and collapses over a chthonic 6 minutes. But we're only going to watch the first part. watched this film over and over. I have asked writing students to do the same. I'm not certain they understand the value of the exercise. I can lead a horse to an ice cream sundae, but whether this horse, that student, becomes an epicure of duration, as Nabokov would put it, is up to them. Most films temporarily obscure real time behind their own fictional time. We escape our time into theirs. This has merits, of course, and some films seem almost open onto absolute time, a bank vault of everlastingness in which the characters are eternally acting out the drama. Lana Turner is always sobbing at Juanita Moore's bedside in Imitation of Life. Janet Leigh is forever turning her face and neck toward the shower spray in Psycho. Documentaries, on the other hand, might give us core samples of real time, but encased like fictions for eternity. Those of Frederick Wiseman have been particularly important to me, even if I find Wiseman's camera discomfortingly cruel.
In jail. That's why I can't get any response. My sister's out in Stony Point. I asked if I could stay up with her. I can't because she works. My husband, we sure would. I tried my aunt who lives on 14th Street, and my grandfather's got cataracts, and he needs to stay in the house, so I can't ask her for help.
Did you both apply for the SSI? Yes, you both went down? Now, you're just living together. You're not married, right?
No. If I knew where my husband was, I wouldn't even be around here. I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. I have a partial disability on my hand, and I'm still palsy. I used to wear a brace. I'm epileptic too. I used to take Dilator. The doctor took me off of it.
You're legally married?
Yes, I am. I don't know where my husband is.
Well, did you ever go to court?
No,
Are you divorced?
no, I'm not.
Now, you know, your husband might be working, making a very good salary. Now, he's legally responsible for
Oh, I know that. Don't you think if I knew where he was, I'd be going to him? I don't know where he is. The last time I seen him was in the summertime.
this summer.
That's right. And it was late at night. I usually would see him at night. It was very quick. He was always with me, right, Larry? You know, when you were with your wife. Right? No, he sometimes, because his wife was working in the welfare, and we've been looking.
You're married also?
That's right. I know it sounds cute.
Did you put down that you're married? Is your wife working? Didn't you say that he has a wife?
I thought he had a wife. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know.
All right. That's Welfare from 1974. Films like Welfare force me to interrogate my own subject position as the one who stares, and forces me to be on alert for the grace of what I think of as reflexivity, by which I mean that people know their own lives constitute a great drama, whether a camera is on them or not. And it's those little subtle realizations that we have through granular, close looking that I believe reveal those kinds of things. But in this clip, you can sort of see it all on display. They're acting, and they're also in need. And for those who haven't seen the film, I recommend it very highly. You can find it on Canopy. And I can't resist also pointing out, if it wasn't clear in the clip, that this guy himself used to work in the welfare office and is back there. It's New York City. All right. As the Swiss photographer Robert Frank stated in his Guggenheim application in 1954, his ambition was to capture things easily found: a town at night, a parking lot, a supermarket, a highway, the man who owns 3 cars and the man who owns none, the farmer and his children, a new house and a warped clapboard house, the faces of the leaders and the faces of the followers, gas tanks and post offices and backyards. And that's from his book, The Americans. He came from Switzerland to the United States. My aunt, Dee Dee Halleck, a video artist who later worked on the set of one of Robert Frank's films, says the images in The Americans made her understand the Jim Crow American South of her own upbringing. Sometimes it takes an outsider to show you what's remarkable, but to be merely an outsider isn't enough. Robert Frank had a magnetic gift for vitality. He knew what to see. And that's actually my aunt and Robert Frank when she was working on the set of one of his movies in the 70s. Next, I'm going to show you a very short clip from Robert Frank's movie, Cocksucker Blues, about the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street tour in 1972. Apologies for the bootleg quality. This is what's available in no small part because of the film's insistence on attention and looking and continuing to pay attention and to look, which resulted in a movie that did not flatter the Rolling Stones, and so it was embargoed by the band and has never been officially released.
And she even went to your concert.
You know who he is?
I do. You want it again? One of those hippie long hairs, one of those hippie radicals.
Mick Jagger went on to put on his spangles and fringes, and the rest of the group seemed to be just sort of sitting around in a relaxed fashion waiting for Stevie Wonder to finish, who was the first part of the concert. Bill Wyman's a bass player for the Rolling Stones. He seemed like a friendly chap, so I asked him a couple of questions. I must say I felt a little bit like the illegitimate son of the Eyewitness News team here, but it was fun. Here's me and Bill Wyman. By the way, it's a banana on his T-shirt. What's running through your nervous system right now?
All right. When we hear that question from an off-screen voice, do you know who he is? The implication is that the elderly lady in the hotel lobby doesn't know, and that the interaction between her and Keith Richards is a clash of separate realities. The movement of her head in response is so slight as to be almost neutral. In any case, it is the wrong question. The point is that she doesn't need to know who Keith Richards is. Her cigarette switches hands. She raises it to her lips. Frank's camera holds the two realities in a single frame: the sideshow pageantry of rock stars in a hotel lobby, and this old woman with her thick glasses and stiff hair, like she's been pasted in from a different era. In the upcoming presidential election, inhabitants of Richard Nixon's reality would be voting in far larger numbers than those populating George McGovern's. I ended the clip with this moment of Keith Richards making a joyful kind of bodily wiggle because it touches me. I feel I know more about him from that little movement with a cigarette in his hand than I learned from reading the full 600 pages of his autobiography. I mean, I did learn a lot in that too, but different things. In his novel, The School of Night, Karl Ove Knausgaard describes music that is full of longing, a yearning for a different world. But what the music couldn't understand, a character muses, was that the music, was that world. In this case, the music, a song called Fragile that the Rolling Stones never released, does understand. And like moths producing their own chrysalis, the Rolling Stones are living in a world that they themselves have conjured. The music knows it, they know it, the camera knows it, and so do we, if we are paying close attention. All right. This is a still from Gosford Park. In writing my first novel, I had already decided that movies would be part of what I would draw from to construct a form. I wanted scenes that would be like the roving camera of Robert Altman, which goes from conversation to conversation in this film. When I saw India Song by Marguerite Duras, it unlocked something to do with dialogue, but also mood. It's a film that's both insanely melodramatic and also completely maddeningly austere. It's not for the faint of heart. It conjures the torpor of a colonial world of luxury and misery side by side. Errol Flynn and his teenage bride, Woodsy, went to Cuba in 1958 to make a movie called Cuban Rebel Girls, a drama about the Cuban Revolution. He thought Woodsy made a more Hollywood-style Cuban revolutionary than the actual and actually quite stunning female Cuban revolutionaries. The strange thing is that the revolution was actually happening while they were making the film about it. When a bomb bounced into their film set, they had to yell, "Cut." In the everlasting vault of this stilted and fascinating and bad movie were almost what seemed like explicit directives for me, that I cast these people and their movie-making project in fictional roles in my own novel-making project. Doesn't she look a little Cuban there? Errol Flynn died from alcoholism right after he and Woodsy made this film. This is Christian de la Mazière from the documentary The Sorrow and the Pity by Marcel Ophuls about Vichy-era France. De la Mazière had fought on the side of the Germans against France and spoke of his shameful past for the first time publicly in this movie. His demeanor, his good looks, his calm voice, his perfectly enunciated bourgeois French, his charisma made me certain he needed to be recruited as a dubious adventurer who ends up in Cuba advising leftists in the mountains. Strangely, I wasn't far off in my instincts about him, which came from studying his face and gestures and words on film only. He later went to Togo and acted as military advisor to General Ayadama. I only learned this after I wrote my novel. This is a film that the Cubans made after the revolution about a historical figure weirdly named Rachel Kay, who was apparently a storied prostitute in the 1930s and came to symbolize the decadence of that era. I have never seen this film, and deliberately. Instead, I put Rachel Kay in my novel as well, having absorbed by that point something of film surface and film logic from other sorts of looking in order to avoid looking and go freehand. Model Shop is a film by Jacques Demy that has a stilted quality to the acting that makes it even more marvelous. Like really wooden acting can seem so real. This is a quote from my own novel, The Flamethrowers. I'd seen Model Shop with Sandro. It begins with oil derricks jerking up and down beyond the window of a young couple's Venice love shack, the drifter and a girlfriend he doesn't care about. The beginning was Sandro's favorite scene, and the reason he loved the film, oil derricks right outside the window, up and down, as the girl and boy lazed in bed, had an argument, puttered around their bungalow, squat and toy-like in the shadow of industry. That's him driving his car. Anna is a documentary that records its own making and features a young pregnant girl living on the streets of Rome who is offered a role in the film in exchange for food and a place to crash. The rivets of her exploitation are right there on screen for the film's 4 hours. I sensed that to understand Rome in 1975, I had to understand the film, not in the way anyone else would understand it, but as a private registration of what I see, scene by scene. I watched it over and over while writing and eventually reproduced the making of it in my own book. Here's Wanda by the time clock at the dress factory in the eponymous film Wanda by Barbara Loden. Like with Anna, I needed to look at Wanda, study Wanda, understand it in order to understand myself. I put not only the film in my novel, but also this exact image. This is from the photographer William Eggleston's only film, Stranded in Canton. Drunken antics, people screaming into the video camera, people kissing on quaaludes. It shows us moments that should not be revisited and therefore must be revisited. I lifted direct scenes and almost like a formal exercise, an art history student describing plates for an exam, I wrote down what was happening frame by frame. Some of those frames ended up in my novel. By watching East Coast, West Coast by Nancy Holt and Robert Smithson, a film that is a spoof about New York conceptual artists versus West Coast stoners and flakes, I suddenly understood that the West Coast flake, played by the artist Robert Smithson, was actually Billy Al Bankston. That's an artist who died recently, who was a West Coast artist. I sought out Billy to ask him about it. He laughed. A picture came together for me of history and persona and jokes that otherwise I never would have picked up on in the little movements, like Keith Richards' little wiggle in Smithson's imitation of someone, and I later knew who. Okay, this is the risky part. That's me and my friend Zoe on Mulberry Street in Little Italy in 1980. I have no memory of this photo being taken. I clearly was not paying close attention. I have no memory of that jacket or that makeup or that hula hoop. It means nothing to me. Someone brought it to me at a reading from my novel, The Flamethrowers. It was the person who'd taken that picture, who happened to be, at the time, the boyfriend of the mother of the girl next to me. The reason I include it, and the reason the image interests me, is that it shows me what I was from the other side. I look out from me and pay attention. When the camera swung around, I realized that there was proof of a lot of things I included in my book that I remembered from Little Italy in the late 1970s. For instance, the Ravenite Social Club, which was downstairs from where we lived. I remembered the Italian girl who jumped off of the roof. I remembered the feeling of Little Italy at the end of that decade, the 70s. The image was proof that I had paid attention, only not to the image itself. And that's my friend Zoe 2 years later, and I included it because I just found that photo, and it speaks of the era. When I decided to write a California novel, I relied heavily for spiritual support and confidence and revivalistic focus, a la Robert Baird, on James Benning's California trilogy, which features long shots of static scenes of the state. It's a three-part film. This one's about Los Angeles. This one's El Valle Centro. I think that's also from El Valle Centro. I put a version of the filmmaker James Benning in my novel, The Mars Room. I called him Jimmy Darling. Here is a snippet. Jimmy Darling had gone to Graceland in Memphis with a camera and said there was nothing to film there, nothing to see, except for the graffiti on the wall surrounding it. Isn't it all made to look glitzy and impressive, I asked. Yeah, he said, it is. What about the car? The car, he said, was like the Virgin Mary on toast. Try to photograph it, and the miracle is gone. James Benning, after reading this scene in my book, made a film as the fictional character Jimmy Darling, which is just a camera scanning the graffiti at Graceland. So there's a meta component here of a real artist being fictionalized and then making art subsequently as that fictional character. But the main point is to look at the graffiti. Look at the thing they are not directing you to see. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to go forward to that. This is new for me, the multimedia thing.
Ero venuta qui a casa mia. Poi, mentre giocavamo, mi spiegavo che cosa è il rapporto sessuale, no? Capito? Cioè, che provi piacere, che provi bene, che provi l'amore, che provi tutte le prove, insomma. Cioè, pensi delle cose fuori dal normale quando fai l'amore, no? Giusto? Allora, lei mi ha detto se provavamo, giusto? Allora io ho accettato. Siamo andati lì con la collina e dopo finita la registrazione per farla vedere, lo vedevo. E ora abbiamo cominciato a baciarsi, no? Baciarsi, abbiamo cominciato a toccarci e poi avevamo del bene. Dopo abbiamo finito e io gli ho chiesto se era stato bello. E io mi ho detto che non avevo mai provato una cosa simile, no? No? Giusto? Allora io ho detto, sono molto felice, lei anche lei. Dopo siamo andati lì e abbiamo giocato. Però eravamo più felici, cioè eravamo più contenti, stavamo più bene, insomma. No?
All right. That's a clip from a documentary called D'amore si vive. I put this boy in my novel, Creation Lake. I was just going to read you what I synthesized from it. I'd recently seen an Italian documentary from the 80s that Vito had recommended. It featured subjects talking about love, including a child with alarming sexual confidence, a boy of 9 named Frank who leans on one elbow and chews gum with rhythmic and casual machismo as he recounts a sexual pursuit. I wondered what had become of him, which is what we say of people who have made an ominous impression. If you wonder what became of someone and they turned out normal and unremarkable, it's disappointing. Asking what became of Frank could only be suitably answered with scenarios like, Frank was killed in the commission of a bank robbery in Milan. Frank is a missionary at a Catholic church in sub-Saharan Africa, preaching abstinence. While those answers might be okay, the only truly satisfying one, the only answer that would not disturb the early impression of Frank and his terrifying sexual confidence at age 9 would be, Frank never grew up. Frank's precocious sexual appetite resulted in the magic trick of permanent youth. Frank looks exactly now as he did at the time he appeared in this film. Button face, brown hair with overgrown bangs. Frank continues to be 9 years old, to chew gum and say, "Justo, justo," and to talk about the relaxing and healthful benefits of sexual intercourse among children. James Benning, who I mentioned, a filmmaker, has a simple definition of an artist as someone who pays attention and reports back. This seems right regardless of medium. The laws of art are constant. The artist is engaged in heuristics, in procedures of investigation by trial and error. There is no such thing as a part-time artist, even if some must work at other vocations in order to survive. The life of the artist in its entirety is an apprenticeship in which details that are gathered while paying attention or learning to pay attention, practicing doing so, might take on the glow of truths that will be reconstituted into art. The artist must look and later extract meaning from her looking. I myself have a definition of art, if not the artist. Art is a secret that an artist possesses, something only she knows about the world and has figured out how to share. To be witness to someone else's secrets makes the world suddenly different than we know it, and through that difference, the world becomes more like itself. A novel is an accretion of such secrets, such difference, a form that allows them to appear. The secrets that we put in novels reveal themselves most clearly through paying attention and not through erudition. They manifest capriciously when impressions of the physical world or visual reproductions of the physical world, such as in movies or in images, become infused with revelatory meaning. Here I might pause to admit that intellectual pursuits, in other words, reading, can also yield secrets, and the artist, of course, reads, but there are extraordinarily well-read people out there who are not artists. The artist chases after that other, more diaphanous and evaporative thing, the angel's share, which I believe resides in how we look, in what we take in. Absorb, take, steal. I used steal for the title of this talk because it seemed kind of sexy and Arlo needed something right away. But stealing is accurate enough. Every minute on earth is yours for the taking. And the minutes from lives that are no longer and worlds that have vanished, they are also yours for the taking. The point is to recognize what one is drawn to, as I was drawn to Frank, and to discern which images, people, moments are yours to claim. Yours to claim, that is, because they have already made their claim on you. Thank you.